Hi, this is one of our series of stories about careers in ergonomics and human factors. If you're interested in people and what influences the way they behave and how they interact with the world around them, then you'll very much enjoy this profession. Today, I'm delighted to say we're talking to a member whose focus has been on designing for people. He works for Philips Design in the Netherlands, and his name is John Mason. Hi, John. Welcome.
Hi, Tina.
It's great to have you here today. We're going to start really with looking at your background, really. How did you get into ergonomics?
Yeah, I started by doing an undergraduate in design and technology, and that's where I first came across it. I remember early lectures with Mark Porter, just really fascinating, the fundamental fallacies of ergonomics and design. It really got me hooked. And I think then the other formative for me was when I did a year placement also during that course. I worked for CCD Design Ergonomics. So I spent a year with David Watts, Mike Stern, John Wood, really sort of learning all about how to design and work with ergonomists and the work that they did. And it's stuck with me ever since. So.
Fantastic. I think a placement is a really useful thing to do. We've had that in several of these stories. So where did you go from there? You did a PhD later on?
That's right. So after my bachelor's, I stayed at Loughborough. I did a industrial design course. I was really keen to still learn about design. And then I got the opportunity to do a PhD in design methods and creativity, which was just a great fun. Lots of user research sort of experience I picked up from there. And that led me into my first job at Philips Research.
Wow. So user research you mentioned there. So tell us a bit about that. What ergonomics are involved in that?
So yeah, it depends on your definition of ergonomics. I mean, ergonomics is everything from the qualitative to the quantitative, how people think and feel to the physical. So the user research that I did was very much qualitative, really understanding how people live, how people use products. And that really came to the fore when I started at Philips Research, because I had to do a lot of technology application. So there's a lot of great scientists at research, but they didn't quite understand how people would use technology. So that was why I was there. And that was just great fun. I mean, we really got to try new technologies and try to introduce them to the world.
Oh, that sounds fantastic. A great way to start in your new career, really.
It certainly was, yeah.
So since then, your main job roles, what have you had, and what sort of the best projects that you've worked on?
I think I can think of sort of three main roles that I've done. So I've been working now for about 15 years. The first I said was Philips Research. A lot of brand new technology. We really got a chance to think and explore, which was really fun. It was more like an extended PhD, I suppose. I think good memories from that one was looking into actually some very early thoughts about circular economy. How can you get people to keep products for longer? And we had some great fun designing products that would have a personality, like a kettle and a toaster and things like that, some of the Philips appliances. So they would grow and evolve with users. So then people wouldn't want to get rid of them because it was, truly unique to them. So we tried all sorts of fun things like that. Another step in my career then was working a bit more for Philips Lighting. And I think a real highlight there, that was looking really at technology applications, so how new things that you can do with light. And I remember in 2012, quite early 2012, we were approached by a marketeer from the business who said that they're planning to launch a new product where they can connect and control light by the internet.
Right.
And then he said, but why should we? Why would people want this? So we had 4 months to do a really fast user research, understanding why you'd want to control light remotely. And it was really fun, great, really intense work. We ended up developing sort of the first framework, an app for the Hue connected light product, which is now one of the largest lighting internet control products. And that was just great fun. It was like being part of a startup, and trying to get that working. So I'm really proud of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. That sounds great. Have you got any more stories like that? Because they're really exciting.
And yeah, my current work now, working at Philips Design, totally different. So going from lighting products and consumer products to healthcare products, this job is really different in the sense that it's really understanding much more the complex systems of healthcare, and thinking about all user types. It's a great puzzle. trying to get all the different varieties of patients that we might come across from, and also the trends in society that we now have to accommodate in our healthcare products. And that is just a wonderful challenge. I've been part of now a new CT scanner. I'm looking at new MR patient tables, radiotherapy equipment. So really some quite serious healthcare appliances.
Yeah.
And it's wonderful to work with such large teams and so many people with different backgrounds. And you've really got to champion that user need to make sure it gets through into the end product.
Yeah.
So it's a very different job, but good fun.
That sounds fantastic. And I think that there are three great examples there of how you can work in quite different ways on quite different products and ideas, really, all for the same company though. That's really good.
All for the same company, yes. Yeah.
But that's really interesting. Thanks for those. So you see yourself staying at Philips, presumably, and what do you think you might do in the future with them?
There's lots of opportunities at Philips. It's been a really good company to me for my career. I think, though, now being much more of a core ergonomist, I went from sort of user researcher through to becoming an ergonomist. I think the next steps for me really are we need to grow the human factors of physical ergonomics. So how we fit our machines physically to people. We have about 80 human factor specialists in the organization, but there's only a handful of people who understand physical ergonomics. So that's something I'm going to grow. I think another direction for me is also human factor strategy. So again, we've got 80 people, but they all use maybe different tools, have different ways of working. They're in different parts of the business with different requirements. How can we sort of make sure that they can work efficiently? What tools do they need? What processes could they follow? And how do we bring in new practices as well? So that's a really interesting step I'm starting to take.
Yeah, absolutely. That sounds fascinating. So it's great. Your career is sort of centered around design, but you've got all sorts of aspects in there. So it really does sort of bring out the skills, I think, and certainly now your experience is really helping you to go in slightly different directions, but to help the organisation as well in their
right. Yeah.
Really, so fantastic. So that's really good. It's, as I say, a really great example of working for one organisation, but having a really quite varied career. So if someone was just starting out today and thinking about sort of perhaps changing and coming into the profession from somewhere else, or even starting as a student, what advice might you give them? Oh,
good question. I think firstly, go for it. I think it's a great profession. You can do so much within ergonomics. It's so broad. I've done everything from user research, qualitative sort of studies, all the way through to the quantitative and the science of people. It's really varied. You can do so much. So I think firstly, just go for it. There's also a lot of work out there. We certainly within Philips, we've got more work than people, and I think that's a trend that will at least stay for at least for now, I think. So I think go for it. It's a good career. My advice also would be get the qualification. Go for getting the masters in human factors. It's a real springboard into the career. It gives you a good network. It gives you the fundamental basics that you need, that you can then choose to specialize later, but it gives you what you need to get going. Yeah. That sounds great. And what do you think about, if someone's already a physiotherapist or an engineer, they're in a different discipline and thinking of coming into this discipline, is it a good move for them to make, do you think? Absolutely. In fact, having sort of a second skill can be quite desirable. Because sometimes if you can be a human factor specialist and still understand how engineers work, I understand and work a lot with the designers. You can talk, to them using their own language as well, and it's sometimes easier to help improve the products together because you understand each other. So I think having that sort of extra feather, in your cap can be very useful, actually. So absolutely.
Okay,
Yeah.
brilliant. That sounds some great advice there. So thank you so much for joining us, John, today. It's been a real pleasure talking to you.
Very welcome.
If you have any interest out there in a career in the discipline, then take John's advice. Get yourself perhaps on an MSc course, or certainly sort of consider all your options, and then take it from there. Okay, thanks for joining us, and see you next time.